Hey everyone, welcome back to Integrative Psychonautics. Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the importance of visualization and what I'm kind of terming somatic visualization or somatic imagination in terms of your own personal growth process, your own personal development process, your own healing process. I'll say up front here, this is one of these topics that is deeply important, that is something you really want to know and really need to know, and that I've not yet talked about on the channel. We'll get into it here, but I just want to kind of let you know up front, this is going to be a crucial piece of information, especially if you're someone who's kind of stuck with your progress, don't know quite what you need to know to heal, don't know quite what you need to know to move forward. I'm going to strongly encourage that you watch this video and learn more about visualization and how you can use it. So let's get into it. So really quick here, this is the video that didn't want to be made, that doesn't want to be made. I have tried to make this video 3 times before this now. I will say my apologies. I've been trying to shoot videos, and every time I try to shoot, I just have a brain blank, and it's kind of been difficult for me to find enough focus to really be clear on camera and not ramble too much. I'm going to do my best in this video to really keep it as clear and concise as I can. This is kind of one of those topics that can invite a lot of expansion and a lot of, riffing on. And so I'm going to try to strike a good balance here for everyone. So let me give a little context here, and then we'll go ahead and get into kind of some of the details and particulars. So visualization is a crucial life skill, in my opinion. It's a crucial life technique. It's something that there's science around. It's something that's well studied, even though it kind of is also used in schools of yoga and schools of meditation and schools of spirituality and whatnot. Obviously, if you're using psychedelics, there's a good chance you've had closed-eye visual experiences and had these kind of amplified visions, and know that it is very possible for the mind to render very clear representations, pictures, patterns, imagery. And in my learning, in all my studies, I've really come to understand that visualization is part of how the nervous system represents reality on an internal level. We have a visual system. And that visual system can be used inside our own nervous system as imagination, as visualization, as idea creating, essentially, right? And so I want to talk to you a bit about how we can use this, because it's so key, particularly if you're one of these people who kind of, is wondering, well, I have a hard time, Dave, with feeling good. I'm always just, every time I take psychedelics, I feel bad, I feel overloaded, I feel stressed. Feeling resource states and feeling well-resourced is really difficult for me. How do you access feeling good? How do you get outside of feeling bad enough? Visualization is an important piece for someone like that. So there's a lot more I could say about it, but again, in the name of trying to be brief, because I know this could be a long video, let's go ahead and dive into talking about kind of the greatest hits of the science a little bit. So I'm just going to give you a couple of the key points about this science. I'm not super well studied in the science of visualization. I would like to learn more about it. I've read a bit. I've looked up some studies. I've crunched some numbers online and tried to pull together just a few important key understandings here for you. But it's a very deep topic. There's actually a lot of research on visualization as a thing, as a real thing that actually gets real results and creates real changes for people. And it's something that's applied a lot in kind of high performance settings, whether we're talking corporate coaching, whether we're talking obviously sports, whether we're talking anything where you really have to just bring it at a level that you don't even know that you're capable of bringing. Visualization has long been the tool that people in those kinds of scenarios rely on to help get their nervous system in alignment with what exactly they want to experience. Okay, so enough selling you on it. Hopefully you're bought into why this is important. I guess I'm a little sensitive about it because it does overlap a bit with kind of woo-woo stuff, and I'm doing my best on the channel to sit in the sweet spot with you guys with being holistic, right? Integrative psychonautics to me means representing both the kind of practical, scientific, mechanistic understanding of things, as well as perhaps the more esoteric, spiritual, intuitive, felt sense, subjective side of things. And I want to be honest about that entire territory and how I see all of that fitting together, giving you a clear picture of my own understanding and validating, perhaps what you're experiencing, but also being intellectually honest about it and not just kind of only buying into woo or only being purely mechanistic and perhaps a little overly conservative about what our common experience is on a subjective level, right? So that's why I'm a little sensitive to bring up the kind of woo-woo side of these topics. Okay, enough said. So science. There's a major key thing I want you to understand about visualization, which is that they did some fMRI studies. I believe it was fMRI. It was definitely brain imaging. I'm not sure exactly how, but they did studies where they found that they would take the same person, same brain, obviously, and they would image their brain while they're imagining doing something or having something, right? And they would visualize it in great detail and great depth for as long as they needed to. I don't know how long they had them visualize, but long enough to really get the neural circuitry fired up. And then they would have them go and do the thing or have the thing or whatever it was, and have them also image their brain while they're having the actual experience or taking the actual action. What they found is a 90% overlap between the regions of the brain in both scenarios, or between the kind of neural paths in both scenarios. So essentially, according to this study, what it's kind of saying is when you visualize, you're giving yourself 90% of a real experience in terms of how your brain registers it. It makes sense. So the thing I want you to understand here is that the deeper layers of the brain, as far as we understand, like the visual cortex and kind of deeper into the brain, probably can't tell the difference between what's imagined or what's visualized or what's remembered or what's dreamt and what we actually experienced, right? So this means that you can give yourself reference experiences, practice something over and over and over without physically doing it. Right? So this is a way you can learn new things at a nervous system level that you maybe don't know how to do physically, or you don't know how to access, or you don't know how to bring into your life, right? So this is kind of a way of kind of hacking the nervous system a little bit to start to steer yourself more in the direction of knowing how to operate in that way, how to have that experience, what to do, giving yourself more of this kind of reference experience for your nervous system. A couple other things here. So one of the major questions, obviously, if we're talking visualization, cool, great, 90% overlap, makes sense. But how effective is it? How much of a change does it make in my outcome if I visualize versus if I don't? Is it worth the effort and the time and the calories burned to spend time imagining, or is it not? So I've heard a few different things here. So I saw one study that kind of looked at it and noticed a range between 3% improvement and 30% improvement, which is a huge range, right? So at 3%, maybe not worth it, but there's definitely an impact and an improvement happening. At 30% improvement, if you go from, if you go from 80% to 110% of an ability, that's a huge jump, right? So that's one answer there. The other was that I believe there was another study that showed like a 50% improvement. So I'm not exactly sure how effective it is, but the point I want to drive home here is it is effective to some degree. And I would argue even like a 10, 15% movement in or increase in results, scaled up over multiple iterations over time is a massive leap forward in progress in whatever it is you want to do. So those are a couple of the key points. I'm not going to link white papers. I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of the science. Perhaps I'll do that in yet another video, but I just want to kind of give you a little bit of the science here to say that yes, there is science. Yes, there are findings that there's significant improvement, change, progress. Yes, it does impact the brain when we visualize. Yes, that creates shifts in the physiology and shifts in the neural circuitry. So enough said, let's talk about different approaches to this and different forms of visualization and how this all kind of fits together in terms of your healing, in terms of, personal growth and getting what you want, and in terms of, psychedelics. How do psychedelics fit into this? Let's talk about it. So I wanted to just take a moment here and address what might be a little point of resistance for you if you're someone who doesn't use visualization a lot or isn't practiced, isn't rehearsed in this. What I've noticed is certain points of resistance that are common for people when, just in general, when working with the mind in a generative way. So for a lot of us, we are only used to using our nervous systems in what we can think of as a more reactive, passive way, right? So whether we're talking about emotions, whether we're talking about ideas, whether we're talking about what we see, what we think, whether we're talking about, what we want, how we want to deal with life, what's going on internally for ourselves, our own thoughts, etc. A lot of times we only relate to that in terms of what's real, what's so, and we kind of relate to it in a passive reactive way of trying to deal with whatever's happening, right? So whether it's external to us and in the world around us, or whether it's internal and it's our own emotions, we are kind of at the effect of whatever's happening, and our responses to whatever's happening is purely reactive, right? This is kind of the default mode of most modern people right now. And so one of these points of resistance that I find a lot is that people can have a little bit of a struggle giving themselves permission to use their mind, use their emotions, use their somatics. We're going to talk about somatics later. Use their nervous system in a generative way that's about something that isn't happening currently, but is about something that could happen or might happen or about the future. I get a lot of feedback from people where they're afraid to desire something that doesn't exist yet, because they don't want to delude themselves. They're afraid to believe in a possibility that they don't know if it's possible for them, and they don't want to be disappointed. They're afraid to imagine something, and allow themselves to get lost in their imagination if it's not real because it seems unserious or silly or this kind of a thing. And so I just want to kind of name this taboo and point it out to you in case there's a bit of resistance for you around this. And I would love to just encourage you to give yourself permission to use your nervous system in a generative way rather than in a reactive way, creatively, towards the things you actually want that are going to be interesting or new or different or fulfilling for you. Give yourself permission to be in the uncertainty, in the unknown, explore, learn, discovery, imagine, play. Give yourself permission to feel good, not just reactively, like, oh, I, drank some alcohol or I had some good food and now I feel good, but feel good generatively first, right? So I would encourage you to challenge yourself if you struggle with this, because there's no reason other than just habit. Like just that we're so used to using our nervous system reactively that, and not generatively, that we just kind of, it's atrophied. We haven't learned how to do it, or we don't remember how to do it rather. There's no real reason outside of that to not use this capacity that we have for imagining, remembering, picturing, stepping into. And this is such a huge part of developing resources, developing the neurology, the brain chemistry, the neural wiring of good feelings. This is such a huge part of, again, teaching yourself how to do things or have things or experience things before you do, and how you might navigate those situations once you have them. This is such a huge way of creating change. Right. And I'll be honest, this ties into like NLP and hypnosis. And it's often that I find myself working with someone in a visualization context where they have their eyes closed and I'm taking them through an exercise, that I have them make a shift internally in how they imagine or represent something in their mind. And it's like they didn't even know they could do that. And it blows their fucking mind, and they have a huge breakthrough just because I'm like, okay, well, move that thing over there 50 feet away from you, or, oh, let's make that bigger and more colorful, or, what happens if you, right? So just playing with visualizations can create deep shifts in meaning and understanding about ourselves or our issues or the things we want to achieve that are, again, if you're not thinking in a different pattern at all, if you're not using your brain in a different way, you're not likely to get different results. This is why this is so important and so key. It is such a crucial part of our progress forward. So anyways, there's a little bit of a side note, a 5-minute side note, but I wanted to just kind of lay out these taboos, speak to the necessity of this. Well, let's talk about how and the different flavors of visualization and imagination. Of particular note at the end, I want you to look for the somatic part because this is something that's under-discussed and incredibly important. So let's talk about those. So first, let me just give you some guidelines in terms of what we're going for with visualization, with generatively using our nervous system, like I was just talking about. What are we after here? What's the effect? How do we know when enough is enough, when we're doing it right, that kind of a thing. So the first thing I want to just kind of say here is what we're after is some form of neural engagement. So we're looking for not just a moment of making a picture in your head and it's like you're watching something on TV and, oh, that's kind of interesting. Like that's what most people do when they think about something for a moment, right? They make a little picture in their head and they're like, oh yeah, it's kind of dissociated, it's far off, it's small, it doesn't feel important because it's not vivid. What we're after, if we want to create something new, or we want to heal something, or we want to transform something, we're looking for vivid experience in the nervous system. And that vividness is essentially neurological engagement, right? So what we're after is stimulating enough of our brain that it really creates deep nervous system engagement of the circuitry and the sets of meaning and feeling and experience to create a vivid experience. So since we're after this nervous system engagement, and quite frankly, without it, transformation and change becomes really difficult. Sometimes this takes a little practice, and there are a lot of different reasons for this. One that I've noticed sometimes is if we're under rehearsed, we just haven't used imagination or visualization in years. Another could be, if we take certain medications, that can kind of dull this capacity a bit. Another could be that, again, maybe we're kind of like, shamed for it. And there's actual little fear around it or a little stress around, going there. It feels silly. It feels trivial. But we want to, for whatever reason, get ourselves into feeling, right? Get ourselves really feeling what we're envisioning so that it's vivid enough that's having an impact on our physiology. And a lot of times this means it's going to take some time. You're going to need some patience with yourself. Especially if you're new to this or it's been a long time since you've done any imagination, you probably will start and it'll feel hard and it'll feel discouraging and you'll try for like a minute or 90 seconds. And you'll be like, I can't do this, and want to throw your hands up and be done with it. Now, I want you to understand that the way the brain is wired up, we have way more neurology set up around threat detection and survival and fear and anxiety states and fight or flight states than we do around positive states. And so it takes a little more time. It takes a little more play, a little more try, a little more effort, a little more, what happens if I do this and what happens if I do that, and exploration. That's what I'm trying to say. It takes a little more to get your brain into gear where you're like, oh, there it is. I remember, right? Or, oh yeah, I can totally see that now. And so you want to have patience with this process, and you want to just keep going at it until it becomes vivid. And that might take 10 minutes. And I would argue if you spend 10 minutes visualizing what you want until it makes you feel good inside, that's 10 minutes well spent. So I would strongly encourage you to take as much time as you need to really get the engine of visualization working for you and vividly getting that engagement in the neurology. The other piece here that often helps to wire this stuff in is repetition. So I would strongly encourage you to do this often, right? Repeat visualizations over and over, multiple times a day, over multiple days until it comes easier, till it's more vivid, till it's stronger for you. It kind of accumulates. You'll build some momentum with it, which is exactly what you want. So in general, we want to be working with visualization, whether we're talking standard visualization or some of the other variations I'm about to explain here, enough to get engaged. Take as much time as you need to get there, and then you want to start to repeat it often. And, I'll be honest, some of my biggest, successes personally, some of my biggest breakthroughs have come from doing this consistently. This is one of these pieces of lifestyle that once you really recognize how useful and valuable it is, it's a game changer. It's a profound thing. So I would strongly encourage you to play with it. But let's talk a bit about a couple different forms of visualization and how this all kind of fits together, different approaches, because some might work better for others. Okay, so let's talk about memory next. Okay, so for a lot of you, probably the easiest way to start to access a resource state or a feeling that you want to experience is to try to remember a time in the past where you've experienced it before. This is pretty commonly, this is how I was trained, and this is also pretty commonly where I go with people once I've kind of gotten them unplugged from feeling triggered and overwhelmed and overloaded. They're a little more stable, they're a little more regulated, but they're not really plugged into the positive side of their neurology. They're not in the resource state really yet. And so, I'm going to have a conversation with them about that and ask them what they want to experience instead, what would be better, and let their kind of unconscious mind decide what is the resource for this particular situation. And then a lot of times my next question is going to be, can you remember a time either recently or when you're younger in the past where you really had this resource or this positive state or this outcome, really profoundly before? And if so, what did that feel like? Can you remember the particulars of that experience? Can you get down into the details of that experience and really vividly recall how that felt? And for some people, that can be a little difficult at first. Again, it takes a little coaching and a little support and just a little patience and time to kind of get the squeaky wheel moving again, so to speak. But once people get there, a lot of times the good thing about memory is that generally it's pretty robust, and it's pulling from what we already know how to do. So it's really useful in that sense that it's not a big stretch to remember something as much as it might be to imagine something totally wholesale that we've never done before, right? And so I would encourage you to play with memory. And I do think that, you might be wondering, well, isn't memory different from visualization? What's the difference? Ultimately, if we're talking visual cortex inside the brain, there's probably not a whole lot of difference. If you're internally accessing a memory and making it vivid again and bringing it back to life and recalling exactly how that felt, where you were, what was going on around you, what did you see, what did you hear, what did you smell and taste, how did your body feel, how does it feel to have that and really recall the memory again, like vividly. That's probably pretty much the same as just a straight up visualization. So first thing you could do is just go for a memory. But what happens if perhaps you're wanting an outcome or an experience that you've never had before? You have no reference experience of, right? So there are other things you can do in a situation like this, but generally that's going to be, instead of pivoting into the past, into memory, that's going to be more pivoting into perhaps the future and imagination, right? Just straight up imagination. Now, there's kind of a few different ways you can go with this. One would be to imagine, think of someone else who you've seen have the experience you want to have. And imagine floating into their body and having that experience and what it feels like through their eyes, through their skin, to have that experience. That can often be a really surprisingly valuable, powerful way to imagine having an outcome that might be difficult to imagine traditionally for you. Another way you can go with it is just to spend some time really thinking about what it would actually, in reality, be like to have the thing. So as an example, I'm not necessarily encouraging you do this, but what I've found is that when we imagine how it's actually going to be, not our projected crazy version of it, but how it's actually in reality going to be, it tends to draw us closer to having that experience more easily. I don't know why exactly, but that's been my experience. And so we want to kind of make it closer to reality than some crazy fantasy, right? So, the example I give is like, imagine if you're winning the lottery, you don't want to imagine that peak moment where you look at the ticket and you look at the numbers and you go back and forth and you realize you have the winning numbers and you have that kind of dopamine overload, serotonin overload, high, peak state moment. Probably better to imagine yourself instead 10 days out. And what does it feel like when you're back to life, but now you're a millionaire, right? What's different and what's the same? How does it feel to be in your life doing reality as you know it and live it, but with millions of dollars behind you? As an example. Some other examples, if I'm going to imagine, for example, playing a big gig as a musician, I want to imagine, what's it like there at sound check and backstage, and what's it like actually up there, being a little nervous, making sure you have everything right on stage, and what does it sound like on stage? Because it sounds weird on stage if you've ever performed. Which is a totally different thing than imagining yourself having that glory moment of like, oh, and looking amazing in front of everyone. There's so much more to the reality of being on stage than just the fantasy of being a rock star, right? So we want to start to visualize and imagine in a way that's grounded in reality, because I think our deeper unconscious mind, if you will, knows how to line us up in life intuitively, unconsciously. I don't know how this happens exactly, but it knows how to bring us in closer into alignment with having the experience we want to have as we start to imagine more often. As we visualize, as we imagine, our unconscious mind goes, oh, okay, I know what that is, and it'll start to steer us in that direction. So really, we are very much reprogramming our unconscious mind when we visualize, when we imagine. But I think the more close that is to your reality, your lived reality, the easier that is for your deeper intelligence to kind of problem solve the gap between where you're at and where you want to be and connect the dots for you, right? But if it's some extreme dramatic, like weird Hollywood peak moment type thing that's, an exaggeration of what the reality would actually be like, I think that takes it further outside of your unconscious mind's ability to problem solve and figure out how to connect the dots. Again, I don't have any solid proof for any of this. This is just what I've observed and experienced over and over, but that's kind of what I've seen. So I would definitely encourage you, if you're imagining, to try to make it real, vivid, yes, pleasing, enjoyable, but also how it's really going to be for you. So try that out. And let's pivot now. And I want to talk about kind of what I think is a related topic that's super important that I don't really hear anyone talking about, which is kind of somatic imagination or somatic projection, and talk about imagination as an embodied experience. So then there's this whole other angle on things, which is the somatic side of things, right? So somatic means body-based, right? And so when we are doing, again, there's no good term for this, but I've heard it mentioned, in things, you'll sometimes hear it in law of attraction work, but you also hear it in things like somatic therapy work or, whatnot, or even, certain forms of personal development, like Tony Robbins, I've heard kind of use this kind of stuff, where we're essentially using imagination, but it's not just, again, distant or visual or just something we're seeing. It's an embodied imagination. It's how does it feel in the body? What are the sensations of the emotions? What are the sensations of that moment, of the meaning, the different layers of experience there? How does it feel qualitatively in my body to have that experience? And can I remember or imagine or project or generatively use somatic information, body-based information, somatic imagination, rather, to create a vivid, neurologically engaged experience? So strictly speaking, if we're deep in the somatic, we're probably not engaging the visual cortex as much, right? So strictly speaking, this may not be visualization in the most tight sense of the word. But I think if we kind of use the principle more broadly, more abstractly, this is kind of a form of that same thing of imagination of, again, generative use of our nervous system rather than reactive use of our nervous system. And there's something profound that happens if we can bring that into the somatic. So if you can really imagine how it feels, right? Imagine, for example, with someone with social anxiety, imagine how it feels to walk into a situation where that would have triggered social anxiety and feel your body totally relaxed and open and at ease, and feel your attention not frantically moving from paying attention to what other people are thinking to paying attention to your own behavior and back and forth, but instead feel what it feels like to have your attention be calm and centered in a situation that before would have been overwhelming or stressful, right? So this takes practice, this takes play. But what I've found is often when we bring it into the somatic, it becomes much more accessible and much more real, much more quickly. In other words, we get results. We see either ourselves develop this capacity, or if we're kind of imagining something happening for us or to us, and you're visualizing it, it tends to show up in your experience the more quickly you can get it in your body as a somatic imagination. So I would strongly encourage you to play with this. I know it sounds a little weird, but it works powerfully. It works really, really well. And so again, this is something that there isn't a whole lot of talk about. I was just recently going through an intake process of receiving some psychedelic therapy myself, and the coach that I'm working with, the guy that I'll be working with, we kind of came upon an intention, and what he said to me right away was, well, I want you to start to sit with that feeling. Sit with the somatics. Imagine the somatics of that intention, right? So this is even something that's already being done by other people working in the psychedelic therapy space. So this is something you can leverage that, again, for me has been a game changer, has been a life changer. I strongly recommend that you play with it. So that would be kind of somatic imagination. I know that's kind of a weird term. I'm kind of just making that up. There's no good descriptor for it, but it is a form of imagination, but it's just very body-based. So let's talk about how this is useful. When would you use visualization, and where can this be applied in your life? So, okay, you say to me, great, I get it, I understand, imagine, visualize, remember, somatics, cool. When the fuck do I use this? How do I use this in my life? What is this good for? So let me put this in context for you a bit. I think in general, this is, again, a life practice to develop and get good at. If you kind of are rusty with visualization and imagination, this is an important part of your nervous system to not allow to atrophy. So I would say in general, use it, and don't just use it in a doom and gloom kind of sense of like, God, what's going to go wrong in my life? Use it generatively towards making yourself feel better, towards inspiring yourself, towards healing yourself, towards motivating yourself, towards teaching your nervous system how to feel good feelings and do awesome new things. But in specific, I do think there's one place where this becomes really, really helpful. So obviously, like I said, I use this a lot in my coaching work. Visualization is a huge part of hypnosis and NLP and whatnot. So it's already something I do. But one place that I found it incredibly useful is in the areas where we are stuck, where we don't know how to solve the problem. We can't find the right piece to the puzzle. We don't know what the information that we need is to learn how to solve our problem. We don't know how to get from where we are to where we want to be exactly. That kind of thing, where it's like sometimes we hit a place where it's like, great, well, yeah, heal yourself, but I don't know how to do that, or I've never had that kind of experience. That's another big place, is like when we're lacking a reference experience. Someone's like, okay, I want you to, just allow yourself to unfocus your mind and zen out. Maybe you've never unfocused your mind and zened out before. I find that hard to believe, but maybe that's true, and you have no reference experience for that. Or, feel what it feels like to be, hugged safely by somebody. And unfortunately, sadly, there are people out there, and you may be one of them, who don't have a reference experience for that, right? And so that might be something where visualization and imagination can be really powerful and really useful to help you problem solve, essentially, using your unconscious mind by giving it these reference experiences so that it can help you kind of fill in the gaps between where you are and where you want to be, right? So that would be, I think, one of the primary uses for visualization, but it's also just a great tool in general in life to, again, tune yourself towards what you want to experience, learn how to use your own nervous system. I get so excited when I talk. Use your own nervous system generatively instead of reactively. Make connection to, sometimes I think of it almost as like, in like a timeline sense, it's like you're making connection to a future potential self and kind of creating like a line or a cord or a lasso that you could pull yourself towards that future version of yourself with. In general, this is something to play with. This is a huge key. Another huge place where this becomes useful is developing resource states, right? So, if you have a hard time accessing peace or accessing joy or accessing, levity and lightheartedness, this is awesome. This is a great way to start to, what would it feel like to have more levity and lightheartedness in my day? Let me imagine, let me, visualize what I would do, how my body would feel, how I would talk, how I would move, what would be different in my life with lightheartedness there, and to start to repeat that over and over and over. You probably get what I'm saying here. This really pays off. So I'm going to just kind of leave it here. Hopefully this video isn't too long or too droning on, but play with this. Explore visualization. It is a crucial tool in your healing. And obviously, if you take this into the psychedelic realm, where psychedelics kind of amplify all of this, it becomes even more powerful. And though sometimes it's really hard to control the visions and the interior experience of psychedelics because it's constantly shape-shifting, we can at least spend some time kind of trying to really envision and align and feel and get that neural activation of the experiences we want to have. So, okay, I'm going to wrap it there. Let me know what you think. Do you find this useful? Do you agree? Did you learn something new? Did you not? Do you do visualizations already? Is this something that's a missing piece for you that maybe if you start doing could be a game changer? Let me know down below. Do the usual, like, subscribe, comment I just asked you to do, and keep watching. I will have more videos for you in the very near future. And I wish you all the best, whoever you are, wherever you are. Much love to you out there. Thank you for watching. I hope you're doing well. And let's keep on kicking ass and rocking on. Talk to you guys soon.